Amara was the kind of woman who moved through life like a soft breeze, quiet, warm, and often unnoticed. In her late 30s, she had the gentle grace of someone who had seen enough of the world to stop expecting too much from it. She lived in the heart of a bustling Nigerian town, where the streets were noisy, the people loud, and time always running ahead of everyone. Her small canteen sat on a corner that most people passed without a second glance. It wasn't fancy, just a few wooden benches, a faded yellow paint job, and a hand-painted sign that read, Mama Amara's Kitchen. But the aroma of hot jollof rice, spicy pepper soup, and freshly fried plantains was enough to make strangers stop in their tracks. Every morning before the sun yawned over the rooftops, Amara was up, sweeping, chopping, stirring. Her hands moved like clockwork, seasoned by years of cooking with her mother who'd passed on the canteen in her belief. Even if the world forgets to be kind, you must not. She lived simply. No TV, no generator. Her slippers had patches. Her blouses were old, but always clean. Yet she never complained. Her smile was steady, even when business was slow or when she had to stretch one pot of soup for 10 customers. What made Amara special wasn't just her cooking. It was how she always wrapped up an extra spoon of rice for a hungry child. How she never let anyone leave empty-handed. Even if they couldn't pay, she didn't ask for thanks, didn't expect applause. God sees, she would say with a shrug. Some called her naive. Others whispered that kindness wouldn't fill her bank account. But Amara had made peace with something most never learn. Doing good isn't transaction, it's a legacy. The first time Amara saw him, he was slumped near the gutter in front of her canteen, his back resting against a rusted pole that held up a frayed poster of a vanished politician. His legs, twisted, frail, and awkwardly angled, told a story of pain and permanence. A wooden stick lay beside him, the kind that looked like it had survived more storms than the man himself. People walked by without pause. Some glanced with thinly veiled disgust. Others murmured short prayers and quickly looked away. A few teenage boys laughed as they passed, tossing a sachet of water at him like it was some kind of game. He didn't flinch. He didn't even look up. But Amara watched. She watched him for several minutes from behind the smoky curtain of her canteen window. Hands paused over a boiling pot. He wasn't begging. He wasn't stretching out his hand. He was just there, still, quiet, like a ghost waiting to be seen. Something in his eyes caught her when he finally looked up, dark, deep, and sharp despite the weakness in his body. They weren't the eyes of someone broken. No, they held something else, something defiant, something lost but not gone. She stepped out slowly, holding a plate of hot jollof rice with 2 pieces of fried plantain neatly balanced on the side. No words, just food. As she crouched beside him and handed the plate over, the beggar blinked, confused. No one had approached him like this before. Not with dignity. Not with kindness. "It's hot," she said softly, "so take it slow." He looked at her, lips parting as if to speak, but then closed them again. He simply nodded. That was the first plate. And neither of their lives would ever be the same again. Every day after that first encounter, Amara made sure a plate was waiting for him, hot balanced, and made with the same care she gave to her paying customers. She didn't ask for his name. Not yet. He never begged for food, never stretched his hand. He simply appeared at the same spot, leaning quietly on his stick, waiting for her silent offering like a ritual neither of them dared interrupt. They started to talk, nothing deep at first, just fragments of conversation. She'd say, "The tomatoes were expensive again today," and he'd smile faintly and reply, "But it didn't stop you from cooking magic." There was a quiet rhythm in their exchanges. His voice was always soft, almost too soft for the bustling street noise. But his words were sharp, observant, reflective. He never asked for seconds, never complained, and never lingered too long after eating. He always said thank you, always, but tongue started wagging. She day feed that cripple every day like say nah family. Wouldn't he day give her back? Pity? Some customers began to mutter their disapproval, loud enough for her to hear. One woman, nose always stuck in other people's business, once hissed, "Amara, be careful, oh, nah so condemned they use food collect bad luck. Others laughed behind her back, calling the beggar her charity pet or a living waste bin. Amara heard it all, every cruel word, but her hands never stopped stirring, never stopped serving. One evening, as she handed him a plate, she said almost jokingly, "They say I'm wasting food on you." He looked at her, eyes calm, unflinching, then let them say, "At least it's not wasted on me." The words hung in the air longer than the smell of fried stew. Something shifted in her chest, like a quiet affirmation that kindness, even when ridiculed, still had power. She smiled. "They don't feed you. I do, so I decide." And just like that, another plate changed hands. Another day of mockery survived. Another silent promise kept. The beggar, who never said much, noticed everything. He watched with sharp, measuring eyes from his usual spot near the canteen, silent, almost invisible. But nothing escaped him. He saw how people treated Amara. Some greeted her with warm smiles, called her sister or madam, especially when they wanted something. Others came only to eat, never to thank. A few mocked her when they thought she wasn't listening, called her foolish for feeding a cripple, a soft-hearted woman wasting herself on hopeless causes. But Amara never changed. She didn't just feed him. She fed anyone who came hungry, even when her pots were nearly empty. Young boys with dusty feet and wide eyes often left with a piece of bread or acrid in their hands. She once gave away her own lunch to a shivering girl caught in the rain. And through it all, the beggar listened. Sometimes, when the rush died down, Amara would sit on an overturned crate near the door and talk, mostly to herself, sometimes to him, about her mother, who taught her to cook with love, about the man who left her when life got too hard, about how silence can be louder than noise. She didn't know if he heard, but he always did. One afternoon, as the clouds gathered and thunder rolled faintly in the distance, she whispered, "I wonder if any of it matters." The beggar glanced up, met her eyes, and though he said nothing, his gaze answered, "Yes, it does." There were nights Amara couldn't sleep, not because of the heat or the buzz of mosquitoes, but because memories had a way of crawling out from the shadows when the world went quiet. Years ago, before her life shrank to the size of a small canteen and a broken bench, she was engaged. Uche was his name, charming, ambitious, with a smile that could silence her doubts. They had plans, a wedding, a house in Lekki, 2 children. Then the accident happened, a faulty commercial bus, screams, shattered glass, days in the hospital. When she finally opened her eyes, the doctor said the bleeding had damaged too much. She would never carry a child. Her womb, they said, was now a scarred house with no rooms. Uche didn't stay. First, he cried. Then he stopped calling. Then he disappeared. Her friends were full of sympathy, until they, too, began to fade. "You're too heavy now," one of them had said. "Too much sadness." When she returned to her family home, her uncle suggested she pray harder. "Maybe it's spiritual," he said. Her aunt warned her not to share her story. Men don't like damaged women. So Amara poured herself into the only thing left, her mother's canteen. It barely made enough to pay rent, but it was something. Her mother used to say, "Kindness is a seed. Don't stop planting it, even when the ground looks dry." Feeding the beggar, the street children, anyone who had less, it made the silence bearable, gave her something the world hadn't stolen. Each plate she handed out wasn't just food. It was defiance, a quiet refusal to turn bitter, a whisper into the universe that, despite everything, she was still here, still giving, still kind. One afternoon, the sun hung low and lazy in the sky, casting long shadows across the canteen's doorway. Amara brought out his usual plate, wiping sweat from her brow with the edge of her wrapper. She was about to turn back inside when his voice stopped her. "Do you ever want to leave all this?" The question cut through the air like a sudden crack of thunder. She blinked. "Leave." She gave a half laugh, unsure if he was joking. "Where would I go? This is my world." But he didn't smile. He looked at her, truly looked, with an intensity that made her chest tighten. She hesitated, then sat beside him. "I do think about it sometimes," she confessed. I dream of a real restaurant. White walls, proper chairs, somewhere children can eat free, and people can come not just for food, but for peace. Her voice softened. Somewhere my mother would be proud of. The beggar nodded slowly, as if tucking her words into a hidden place inside him. Then, without another word, he picked up a spoon and began to eat. Amara watched him, a strange chill crawling up her spine. Something in the air had shifted, but she couldn't quite name it. The day started like any other, pots clanging, stew bubbling, the hum of the street rising with the morning heat. But by midday, Amara noticed the absence. His corner, the one by the rusted pole, was empty. No stick, no silence, no sharp eyes watching quietly. She waited, served customers with half her mind somewhere else. Every time the bell above the canteen door jingled, her heart jumped, but it was never him. By evening, the emptiness had grown louder than the street noise. She stepped out, wiping her hands on her apron, and scanned the faces around. Nothing. She asked a few regulars, tried to sound casual. "You seen that man? The one who sits there?" Most shook their heads. One man shrugged. "I just thought he was part of the street." That's when it hit her. She didn't even know his name. As the sky turned to dusky gray and the first stars blinked awake, Amara sat alone on the bench where he usually ate. The plate she had prepared sat untouched beside her, growing cold. That night before bed, she knelt beside her mattress, folded her hands, and whispered, "Wherever you are, be safe." She didn't know why, but she felt afraid. 3 days later, just as the midday sun carved gold lines to the canteen's doorway, Amara looked up and froze. He was standing there, but not the same. His hair neatly trimmed, the wild, bushy curls were gone. His clothes, clean, pressed, simple but strikingly out of place for someone who used to sit in the dirt. He still held the same stick, still walked with that slight limp, but everything else had changed. Amara stood speechless, ladle in hand. Her eyes locked on him as if her brain needed time to confirm it was really him. He smiled, calm, familiar, but with something new behind his eyes. Something unreadable. "You're back," she whispered. "I told you I'd be around," he said, voice steady, even. "But today, I need to ask something of you." Amara blinked. "All right, close early, just for today." She glanced back at the simmering pot, the two boys waiting for their food on the bench, and then back at him. "Close? Why?" He stepped forward, lowered his voice. "Please, I want to take you somewhere. Somewhere important." "Take me?" she asked, incredulous. He raised his hand slightly, and as if on cue, a sleek, black private car pulled up beside the canteen. The driver stepped out and opened the back door. Amara stared. Her heart thudded hard in her chest. This wasn't a joke. Something was happening. Something she didn't understand. "You trust me, don't you?" he asked softly. She didn't answer. She just reached behind, untied her apron, and slowly stepped out from behind the counter. Every step toward that car felt like stepping off the edge of everything she knew, and she had no idea what waited on the other side. The leather seat beneath her felt too smooth, too foreign. Amara sat stiffly. Her fingers knotted in her lap as the city blurred past the tinted windows. The beggar. No, the man beside her rested his cane against the door and leaned back, calm, as if he belonged in a place like this. "I had to disappear for a bit," he said, breaking the silence. "There were loose ends to tie, things I couldn't ignore anymore." Amara turned to him slowly, searching his face for a lie, a clue, anything. "Loose ends?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, but it wasn't the weary, grateful smile she was used to. This one was layered, knowing. "You saw one side of me. A real side, yes, but not the whole story." She didn't respond. Instead, she turned to the window, watching familiar buildings turn into streets she no longer recognized. A past life? What did that mean? Was he dangerous? Rich? Running from something or someone? The hum of the car felt louder now. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears. She wanted answers, but a part of her was afraid of what the truth might be. Still, she didn't ask him to stop. The car slowed to a stop in front of towering iron gates that gleamed under the afternoon sun. Beyond them stretched an estate so vast it seemed like a world of its own. Immaculate gardens, sparkling fountains, and a mansion that looked like it belonged in a magazine. The walls were painted pure white, and every detail, from the carved pillars to the polished marble steps, shouted luxury. Amara's breath caught in her throat. She had never seen anything like this, not even in her wildest dreams. The streets she knew, the cramped markets, the noisy buses, all worlds away from the silent grandeur. Before she could gather her thoughts, the door opened, and a sharply dressed man stepped out. "Welcome back, Sir Tund," he said, bowing slightly as the beggar, no longer a beggar, walked in with a calm confidence that seemed to command the space around him. "Sir Tund?" Amara whispered to herself, the name hitting her like a bolt of lightning. She looked at him, searching his face, but he said nothing. Her mind raced. Who was this man really? Why hadn't he told her? She stayed silent, heart pounding, waiting for answers that seemed just out of reach. They settled into a quiet room that looked out over a lush garden, where sunlight danced on the leaves and birds sang softly, a stark contrast to the heavy silence between them. Tund's eyes, once guarded, softened as he finally began to speak. "I wasn't always the man you saw outside your canteen," he said, voice low but steady. "I was a billionaire, a tech investor. I built companies, made deals that changed lives, and lost a part of myself in the process." Amara listened, heart pounding with every word. "There was an accident," he continued, "a crash that didn't just take my mobility, but shattered my trust in people. I disappeared because I needed to heal, but more than that, I needed to find out if kindness still existed, if it was real, or just something people pretend to have." He looked at her then, eyes searching hers. "That's why I watched you. Your kindness. It wasn't for show. It wasn't for fame or reward. It was genuine. You showed me there's still hope." Amara's breath caught. The man she thought was a beggar had been testing her all along. "And now," he said quietly, "I need to know what comes next, for both of us." Tund stood and walked over to a tall, polished wooden cabinet against the wall. His footsteps echoed softly in the quiet room. With deliberate calm, he opened a hidden safe embedded in the cabinet and pulled out a small velvet pouch, its deep blue fabric shimmering faintly in the sunlight. He placed it carefully on the table between them, the weight of its presence filling the space. "This is just the beginning," Tund said, his voice steady but carrying a hint of gravity. "But before I give you anything, before you even think about what this means, you need to know the whole truth." Amara's brow furrowed, confusion tightening her chest. She leaned forward, eyes fixed on the pouch, then back to him, waiting. He took a slow breath, the kind that seemed to steady more than just his voice. "There's something I haven't told you," he began. "Something that changes everything you think you know about me, about why I vanished and why I came back." Her heart pounded louder now, every beat drumming in her ears. The room seemed to close in, the shadows deepening. Amara's eyes widened as she stared at him, breath caught in her throat. The moment stretched, fragile and electric. Tund's lips parted, ready to reveal a secret that could shatter everything, or change it forever. To be continued. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss the next chapter of this unforgettable story. You won't want to miss what happens next.